Hello and welcome back to Paddock and Track, the show where we bring you news on and off the track. I'm Max, and I'm joined as always by my lovely co-host Amaan.
What is up, guys?
And we are back with the Mexico City Grand Prix.
Yes.
This was a pretty exciting one in some regards, especially for those Ferrari fans.
Yeah, definitely. But I also think that for all fans, I think it was very interesting towards the beginning of the race. For sure.
Yeah, so speaking of the beginning, let's go through the qualifying order. We see Sainz on pole, which is, again, good for Ferrari. They seem to be able to repeat the performance that they had at Coda, which is definitely great for them. And then Verstappen right behind him, so they're really the biggest fight here is the championship fight for second place in that constructors. McLaren's not too far away in first place, but the fight for second place in the constructors between Red Bull and Ferrari at this race especially was a big thing. So that's important to see those two right by each other.
That definitely for sure. But also, I mean, not much of a priority. But still, one is Max Verstappen in second, Lando Norris in third. So that drivers' championship fight as well is heating up because we see Verstappen in second, Norris in third. So Norris really needs to pass Verstappen, needs to have a good footing in this race where it needs to finish like maybe a little bit of. He still needs to finish above Verstappen in order to gain on him.
Well, and we also see Leclerc in fourth, so that's kind of the championship fight. Of course, Leclerc's not necessarily. I think most people have kind of ruled him out as in terms of fighting for first. And honestly, Norris is not much further ahead, so like he's not.
I think he's closer to Leclerc than he is to Verstappen.
Yeah, so it's a little tricky, but Leclerc is right up there with Norris, especially. So that fight for second place in the drivers' championship is also big. So it's important for Leclerc that he's still right up there with them.
Yeah.
And then we see Russell and Hamilton in fifth and sixth place. So Mercedes does not really have a shot at getting the third place in the drivers' champion or in the constructors.
Yeah.
But it's still good points for them.
And then we see the Haas and Kevin Magnussen in seventh place, so good for them.
Yeah.
And then we see the Alpine of Pierre Gasly in eighth as well, so that's also very good for them. And also a surprise here, Alex Albon of the Williams in ninth place, so good to see them in the top 10.
Well, and Hulkenberg in 10th place also, so both Haas cars into Q3, which I think is very impressive to see from them. They've really had some good development, and the drivers seem to be performing very well.
For sure.
And very consistent, too, I would say.
Yeah.
And then Sonoda and Lawson in 11th and 12th. So the two RBs in okay qualifying performance for them, not into Q3, but right at the top of Q2, so that's something for them. And then Alonso in his 400th Grand Prix, which is crazy to think that 400 Grand Prix, that's a lot. He is in 13th place, right behind the two V-Carbs, with his teammate behind him in 14th.
So not really great for Aston at all. I mean,
not great.
It's been the consistency though about Aston Martin, how they've been like middle to low in the
positions. And then we see Bottas down in 15th. A better qualifying than his teammate Zhou Guanyu in 19th, and then Colapinto in 16th. So clearly there's some sort of a disparity between those two Williams because you have Albon in 9th and then Colapinto down in 16th. And then Oscar Piastri down in 17th. A problem for him in Q1 as he went over a curb at turn 12, so his lap time was deleted, so he could not get out of Q1. So unfortunate for him, especially again as we talk about the constructors championship fight that's really heating up. That's an important thing that he will be missing out on some points. Based on how the race goes.
And Mr. Home Race himself, Sergio Perez, down in 18th place.
Yeah, it's not. This really, I think, confirms everyone's thoughts that he will be cut after this season.
Yeah.
I mean, you see him in 18th in his home race where, emotions are high, and that's where you want to do the best. And, I mean, the fact that it's his home race, you feel like he should be doing better. The fact that it's his home race, you would think there's at least encouragement to do better. But even in general, you would just think, Sergio Perez is a man who's had a lot of time in F1, a lot of time in F1, and he has had some highs, he's had some lows, and recently he's had a whole lot of lows. I don't think that's what Red Bull wants to see. He's had a couple good moments, a couple times where he looks fast, but most of the time he's just not.
I mean, it's just severely detrimental for their case for the constructors, too.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been losing a lot of ground, and it seems to be they're continuing to lose it as well.
Yeah. And then we see Esteban Ocon starting from the pit lane. So there's not much to say there. It's Esteban Ocon. You know, what do you want? I don't know. Now getting to the start of the Grand Prix, Verstappen had a very good start, I would say. And he was able to get past Sainz pretty quickly going into turn 1, and that straight is very, very long in Mexico.
Yeah.
It's one of the longest straights of the calendar, and it's just a long run from pole position down to the turn 1. So a good start here I think is really important because you don't have that turn 1. It's not like Singapore where turn 1 kind of comes at you real quick.
Yeah.
You know, that turn 1 is far away. So a very good job by Verstappen to get a good start off the line. And then Hamilton also gets past his teammate George Russell.
Yeah.
Important for him also. I think those two have had kind of a weird season. There's been a lot of ups and downs, but recently I feel like they've been kind of stagnating in that 5th, 6th kind of area.
Yeah, they have been.
It kind of behind the McLarens, the Ferraris, and Max Verstappen.
But they're also ahead of the other lower teams as well. So
they're kind of like the low end of the top group, I would say.
Yeah.
They're kind of in a weird spot, but it's important still. Like Hamilton was able to get past him, so it shows that. I think that shows to a lot of people that like Hamilton still can be faster than his teammate George Russell. And we saw that a little bit later in the race too, but I think there's a lot of thoughts going around, at least in my head, of like, is Lewis Hamilton really, is he kind of past his prime? I think we know he's past his prime.
Yeah, I think so.
And part of that is he hasn't quite had the car that he has had in previous years, but I feel like there are some moments that you're like, yeah, I think Russell's probably better than him, but then there's other moments where you're like, yeah, you know, Hamilton's still doing pretty good. He's still kicking.
I think it's just tough to tell as of now because we've seen them win an equal amount of races. So, and they've been having equal amount of performances. So I think they're equal in terms right now.
Yeah.
But I think for sure that, I mean, if Hamilton's on the same, it's either George Russell got better or Hamilton got worse. So we don't know that for sure. So we'll see definitely next season for sure how Hamilton does because he's definitely going to be in a better Ferrari car.
Yeah.
And then we'll also see, we'll just compare him.
Well, because the thing is, too, like, one of those wins for Hamilton came
as George Russell's disqualification
for Russell.
But it was a 1-2, though, so it could have been, like, the same amount of performance, though.
Yeah. It is hard to say, but we'll keep watching Hamilton, especially as we go into next season. We'll see what happens for him.
Yeah, and then we see Yuki Tsunoda, who was out in turn 1, but it was, like, a 3-car, like...
It was kind of a weird incident.
Yeah.
It was sort of like a 3-into-1. It just didn't work. Really what I feel like it looked like happened is Albon and Tsunoda were basically next to each other. I don't think either of those two did anything wrong. And Gasly kind of came across the track. Not a ton, but just enough that Albon had to move over a little bit, and then it just changed direction.
Yeah, so then Yuki spun off the track and hit the wall. And then Albon also had damage that he had to go out as well.
Yeah, so unfortunate for those two. But it did bring out the safety car, so that brought the pack back together, which was very helpful for Carlos Sainz.
Yes, for sure.
As after the restart, a couple laps in, he didn't get him right away, but Sainz was able to get past Verstappen. Verstappen seemed unhappy with his battery, so I don't know if maybe they have different modes I know they can do in terms of recharging and things like that. So maybe Verstappen was unhappy with his. It seemed like he had used too much battery defending Sainz, and now trying to get back past Sainz after he had passed him was difficult. So he seemed unhappy there. And we also saw at this point Sergio Perez being investigated for a false start, which then turned into a 5-second penalty.
Unforced. That was a totally unforced error, which is just sums up what Sergio Perez has done all season. Just mediocre and undeserving of that Red Bull seat.
It was a little bit sad because at the end of the day, like, this is his job. How many times has he started in F1 car? And you know that now he gets a full start. I mean, things happen, right? Like, people have false starts. Lando Norris had a false start. Well, it ended up not being
Actually, it wasn't. He was, like, barely on the line.
He jumped it a little bit, but he managed to keep it in the box. But still, at the same time, like, these things happen, and it makes sense. But at the same time, I mean, it's Sergio Perez. Like, he's been in this sport for so long. We keep saying this, but, like, I mean, it's true at the end of the day. Like,
the funny part is that he tried to defend it. He was like, "Oh, it's a great start."
Yeah, it's kind of funny. But you know, it's just, I don't know. We keep coming back to the idea that Perez just, I think, is not the driver that he once was, and I think that's okay. Like, people get older and he's not as good. I don't know. He's just not as good as he was, and I think that's reasonable, right? It happens to everybody, but I think it's time for him to be out of the Red Bull seat.
Yeah, I mean, he has had his great moments in the past, but I feel like his time has come to an end, just like Daniel Ricciardo's.
Yeah, I mean, Ricciardo's was a little bit of a interesting exit, but yeah, when you're in a Red Bull and you're consistently not getting points, you're consistently out in Q1,
yeah,
and we're seeing things like this that are just silly mistakes.
Yeah.
I think, it's time to go. Getting back into the race, though, we saw Norris then a big fight with Verstappen. Those two were really going at it.
Yeah.
And it kind of ended up being a little sad, the way that things went down.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, they were like forcing each other off the track. I mean, we see that Norris was forced off the track by Verstappen.
Yeah, it was kind of weird.
And then he re-entered it, and then he was about to give the place back, but then then Verstappen forced him off the track again.
Yeah.
So it was so weird to me that this whole incident it was, I don't know.
Yeah, especially
so
the second time. I mean, both of them went off the track.
Yeah.
So it was very strange. Although not entirely out of character for either one of those two.
Yeah.
We know they've had their share of run-ins. The last race in Coda, they had a run-in together. You look back to, like, Austria, they had run-ins together. So we know these two are being a little feisty, especially for Norris as he's trying to get a world championship. I don't think it will happen personally, but that's neither here nor there. But, yeah, so, it was a little bit sad for the two of them. Just kind of a silly fight, and it ended up in a total of a 20-second penalty for Verstappen, 10 seconds for forcing Norris off the track, and then another 10-second penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. It was kind of silly.
I think it was a little harsh.
I don't know.
10 seconds for each, though.
Well, it's at the end of the day, it's like, is it a dangerous thing that he's doing?
Yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't the most dangerous. Like, there's been more dangerous moves made in Formula 1, but it was like reasonably like dangerous, and I think it's somewhat reasonable.
Yeah, but I mean, like 20 seconds though. That's a long time.
I mean, he made two moves that he shouldn't have made.
Yeah, that's true. I guess.
But and so that was not great for Verstappen. Obviously, it really put him down the order, of course, and he was able to make his way up somewhat, but at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
Even if you're Max Verstappen. And then we see during this whole fight, Leclerc getting past both of them and getting up into second, so a 1-2 for Ferrari. Really good for them, as they, obviously, as we said, they need the points to get past Red Bull in the Constructors.
To catch McLaren as well, so that's like a two birds, one stone right there.
Yeah, so very good from Leclerc, just smart driving from him to capitalize on that. And then we also see, I just thought something that was interesting was that Russell's aero package was much, much older than the new aero package that Hamilton had. Hamilton's package was essentially new for this race, and I think Russell's dated all the way back to Miami.
Oh, wow.
Which is obviously not great, but Russell seemed faster at times.
Yeah.
Not the whole time, but there was a lot of times where Russell seemed to be a lot not a lot quicker, but quicker than Hamilton. And I thought that was very interesting.
It's interesting because we were comparing how much, like, if George Russell got better or Hamilton got worse, but I'm saying this is a clear sign that George Russell is capitalizing on what he has, and he's making it work, and he's been faster than Hamilton for a bit with it as well. So
so impressive from him, that he was able to make it work and just do what he needed to do, even on an older aero package. And then we also saw, sadly for Fernando Alonso, retiring in his 400th Grand Prix. There was something stuck in one of his ducts or radiators, and he was having brake problems because he was overheating. It's just a little sad for him. I mean, what can you do? He could do nothing about it.
Nothing about it, exactly.
And it's sad just because 400th Grand Prix, and you're out of the race.
Yeah,
it's unfortunate.
It is very unfortunate for him, but what can you do?
Yeah. And then I thought a very interesting fight was the Perez-Lawson fight. Lawson seemed much better at defending than Perez was at attacking, But it also ended up in like some damage for mostly for Perez. Yeah. I didn't see any on Lawson, though I saw some debris coming off. It was hard to tell from whom. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Perez had a decent amount of damage to his side pod. Not enough that he had to retire, but there was damage for sure.
Yeah. But this is also one of those telltale signs, though, that maybe it's time for Perez to go and Lawson to come in. And I mean, Lawson's the prime candidate to replace Perez at that Red Bull seat.
I still feel like that's a little bit silly, and I know it's hard too because in this race we couldn't see what Yuki could have done. He had a pretty good start. You know, he had gotten up to Albon. He had gotten essentially past Albon. Mm-hmm. So it's tricky to say because we don't know what Tsunoda could have done this race.
Yeah.
But I still think it's a little silly that they're thinking to promote Lawson over Tsunoda, and I know part of this has to do with Honda, right? Mm-hmm. And the fact that Honda is going to be going. They're going to be supplying engines for Aston Martin in 2026, so that could lead to a move for Yuki Tsunoda. We know Honda has some rules about they want a Japanese driver on the team, and so that might be part of why Yuki is still around. But I think at the end of the day, Yuki is still a good driver. I mean, he's outperformed the teammates that they've given him.
Yeah.
And it's a little hard, again, because, you know, Lawson has not been in for a full season. And Ricardo was not in for a full season, and even 2 years ago, right? Nick DeVries was not in for the whole season, and so it's hard to say. But at the end of the day, I think Yuki is outperforming the teammates that he's given.
Yeah, I agree, and it's sad to see for Yuki, but like, what else?
Yeah, what else can you do?
What else can you do?
And at the end of the day, it comes down to Christian Horner and Helmut Marko and whatever they decide.
Yeah, exactly.
It's still a little unfortunate for him. And then we also saw Piastri was like on the mediums for a very long time. And I thought that was an interesting strategy call by McLaren. They didn't pit him until lap 40. So he was on the medium tires for 40 laps, and then he had to do the last 32 on the hards. I get that maybe they wanted to... I think their idea was to maybe hold up Verstappen, but they didn't end up needing to.
Yeah.
Just to help Lando, but I think that their strategy was a little bit strange just because I felt like Piastri, it didn't really help Piastri out.
Well, yeah, also, I think Verstappen also has that 20-second penalty. Did he serve it at this point?
He did, yeah.
He did, so... I mean, I don't know what the strategy was for that, but it's an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, it just felt like Piastri was losing a lot of places, especially to people like Hamilton. And so it was kind of a struggle for him, and I didn't really see any reason for them to keep him out for so long.
Yeah, I don't think his race was a strange one for sure. It wasn't the best one. I mean, to be fair, he did start in P17.
Yeah, so, I mean, and he ended up in, we saw him ending P8, so it's reasonable. Like, he drove a good race.
Yeah.
Especially, again, like you said, starting all the way from the back, all the way down there in P17. But at the end of the day, like, their strategy just seemed weird.
Yeah, for sure.
We also saw, I just thought it was interesting to see Perez, after his fight with Lawson, was... kind of fell back and then was fighting with Stroll.
When Stroll passed him.
Yeah, and then he ends up like pushing Stroll just like completely off the track. I don't know. It was very silly. I think he was maybe a little annoyed with Lawson. He was taking out on Stroll, but it was kind of sad because like eventually he just got passed by Stroll, and I don't know. Yeah. Again, you're Sergio Perez and you're in a Red Bull and you're fighting the Aston Martin
and lost to the Aston Martin.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of not. It's not really acceptable for a Red Bull driver.
Yeah, not at all.
We also saw Leclerc having a little moment. Almost
he lost control of that car.
Yeah, it was a little scary for him and for the Ferrari fans. But yeah, he almost lost it, just barely managed to catch it.
But unfortunately, he did lose the position to Norris.
Yeah, so unfortunate for him, of course. But you know, he at the end of the day, he didn't crash.
He didn't.
So yes, he lost the 1-2. One could make the argument that maybe Norris would have caught him anyways.
Yeah, he was there.
Norris was making up a lot of time on on Leclerc. Mm-hmm. So it's tricky to say maybe Norris would have gotten there, but this only helped Norris get past.
Yeah.
And then we also saw right towards the end, Hamilton and Russell having a bit of a fight. It went on for a very long time, about like 12 laps, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And Hamilton finally, eventually got past Russell. But this was interesting to me as like I don't know, Hamilton was just, he seemed like he should have been much quicker.
Yeah.
Russell had damage to his wing. It was like floppy, like the one end of it was just not.
Not only that, his aero package is also older
yeah,
too.
right.
So,
and so I feel like Hamilton had all the advantages, and it took him a long time to pass him. And there's a lot like long DRS straights here at Mexico, and so I don't know exactly. He seemed like Hamilton had all the advantages, but just was not able to make the most of it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And realistically, would he have caught Leclerc in third? Probably not. There's a big gap, and in fact, a pit stop size gap between the two. But
which is important.
At the end of the day, like I think Hamilton should have been able to catch faster.
I think so too, yeah, because he had all the tools in his bag and he didn't capitalize on it.
Yeah.
Which, goes to show like what is Hamilton past it. He's like, is he past his prime?
Yeah. And then the two young drivers on the grid, the two new drivers, the two drivers that replaced another driver halfway through, or a little more than halfway through into the season, in having a little fight, and then I thought it was just kind of silly. I mean, okay, they went into one corner, and it was a little argy-bargy, right? There was a little bit of contact between the two of them, but then Colapinto went off, and he just came straight back on.
Went back on the track. His back wheel hit Lawson's front wing.
Yeah,
it was.
I don't know. It was a little bit silly. I get that he
caught himself in that one.
Yeah, I get he's very, very. They're both very new to Formula One, but I mean, he just went straight into Lawson.
Wow.
There was nothing Lawson could have done there except maybe like brake really hard all of a sudden, but I don't think that's a good plan. It was a little silly. Colapinto ended up getting a 10-second time penalty for causing a collision, which is reasonable because he did cause a collision by coming on track.
And then towards the end of the race, we see Leclerc getting the fastest lap. He had enough time in front of Hamilton. We said before 30 seconds, so he had enough time to pit on softs, come back out, and still be about like 7 seconds ahead of Hamilton. So he eventually did get that fastest lap point, which is crucial in catching McLaren in the constructors and moving ahead of Red Bull.
Yes.
So they did move ahead of Red Bull after this one. So
yes, which is very big for them, especially as we know in the Constructors' Championship, higher in the Constructors means more money for next season.
Yes.
Of course, you always want more money in Formula One because you never have enough money.
Ask Williams that one.
Yeah, they definitely do. So looking at the finishing order, a very good result from Carlos Sainz. First place, of course, so he managed to hold that throughout. I mean, of course, he wasn't leading the entire race, but he ran a very good race. Basically, from a couple laps after that safety car restart, he led basically the entire thing. Yeah, very impressive from him.
Yeah.
Norris in second place. So Norris kind of ran a very stable race for the most part after the beginning fiasco and his time with Max Verstappen. He really just led I think a consistent race, and he was able to capitalize on Leclerc's mistake and then come up into second. But also a good result for Leclerc. I mean, P3 is not bad.
I mean, it's better than DNF.
Yeah, definitely. And it's still a solid points haul for him and for the team. And then we see Hamilton in fourth, Russell in fifth. So, again, they're kind of stuck in that middle of the pack. Really, the only reason they're fourth and fifth is probably because of Verstappen's 20-second penalty, which put him down into sixth after a little bit of work to make up some places, which was impressive by him, especially in a very short amount of time.
Yep.
But, it was overall a decent race for the two of them, for Hamilton and for Russell, but just nothing very exciting.
It wasn't really special, the race. I mean, they just raced the race and stayed where they were.
But a good race for the Haas drivers. Is seventh for Magnussen and ninth for Hülkenberg. So very good job from them.
Yes.
Their constructors battle is also very exciting for them. And they solid points. So I mean that's a decent amount of points for them. They both scored points, so that's very good.
Yeah. And we mentioned before Oscar Piastri P8. I mean, pretty decent outcome considering that he started in P17 and they had a weird strategy for him. So I think P8's pretty good for him. Yeah. Especially also, many people forget that he's also in his second season, so this is really good for Oscar. Yeah.
And then we see Pierre Gasly in 10th, so picking up some points for Alpine as Ocon was not picking up points. Again, it's hard when you start from the pit lane, but only coming up to 13th. And then Stroll in 11th, so we didn't really see a lot of him, but, I mean, he made his way up to 11th, so clearly he was doing something right. But it's not a point-scoring position, so at the end of the day...
It doesn't matter.
It's not that big of a deal, yeah. Colapinto in 12th, but again, with that 10-second time penalty. And then Ocon 13th, Bottas 14th, Zhou 15th, so another disappointing result for Stake, as per usual. Lawson down
finished ahead of Perez.
Yeah, but part of that was that Perez had pitted to attempt the fastest lap, which seemed like a little bit of a weird decision because he had damage to his car.
Yeah.
But I don't know. He didn't end up getting it anyway, so he was just last.
Yeah.
And then Liam Lawson in 16th because he had to pit for a new wing. And then, again, the 3 DNFs of Alonso, Albon, and Tsunoda rounding off the grid. Sad for Alonso.
Yeah.
But, kind of meh for Albon and Tsunoda,
Yeah.
It's less sad for them. But sad for Williams because now they have to fix another car. Well, I think that wraps it up for us on this episode of Paddock and Track. I hope you guys enjoyed. It was a really good race to watch, and we will see you for the next one.
Goodbye.